Hello and welcome to Faith in a Digital World here on TWR-UK. I'm James Maidment Fullard. We live in an age where almost every part of life has migrated onto a screen. Our work, our friendships, our entertainment, even our spiritual habits. And yet beneath the constant notifications and endless scrolling, something fascinating is happening. People are quietly rediscovering the power of the analog, the physical, the face-to-face. In a world that promises connection at the tap of a finger, many of us are feeling more fragmented, more distracted, and more isolated than ever. And that, I think, raises a crucial question for Christians today. What does it look like for us to share our faith meaningfully in a digital age? How do we use technology wisely without letting it use us? And why, even with all of our digital tools, do personal in-the-room encounters still carry a weight that pixels can't quite replicate? To help us explore that, I'm joined by someone who has thought really deeply about this tension. His name is Simon Lennox, and he leads the Word One-to-One, a ministry that's built on the simple but transformative practice of opening the Bible with another person, one conversation at a time. In a culture of quick messages and curated feeds, Simon champions something slower, more human, and profoundly relational. We're going to talk in this conversation today about why in a digital world face-to-face evangelism still matters. But we'll also talk about how digital habits are shaping our spiritual lives and what it means to let technology be an excellent servant rather than a poor master. We'll explore the renewed appetite for analog practices, the opportunities and dangers of digital discipleship, and how churches can help people build healthier rhythms in a hyper-connected world. Simon Lennox is with us on the programme now. Simon, first of all, thank you very much for being with us on the programme today. Many people, including Christians, are intentionally stepping back from screens. What do you think is driving this renewed appetite for more analog practices?
Well, I can only speak from my own personal experience, and I'm one of those Christians that is wanting to step back from the digital domination, or at least bring some balance. And for me, analog represents something liberating. Like we're in a world of so much information, algorithms are offering up all sorts of things on our screens all the time. We feel this sense of uncertainty. We're not in control. We're being manipulated, etc., etc. So analog allows you in some way to take things into your own hands, and there's a relief with analog. And by analog, I mean just disconnecting from the digital domination, even getting outside, going for a walk, picking up things that are physical, not digital, whether it's a book or whether it's picking up old friendships that you find you're always talking on WhatsApp or video conferencing instead, saying, let's hang out, let's go for a coffee, let's talk. And so bringing balance, I think, is what people are looking for now. It's becoming a cultural phenomenon now. A lot of people are writing about it, that they're really taking it to the extreme. They're trying to put digital dominance to bed and do something much more radical. And maybe that's coming from the effect of digital engagement on mental health. Maybe people feel safer when they're disconnected because their data and information isn't being harvested. Or for parents, they're wanting to model something different to their children. So they're taking them outside, getting in nature walks. Really, analog for me opens your eyes to what we're missing. And we watch videos of real life. Why not experience real life? And so it's very attractive. There's a lot of positives to it, and it reminds us again that digital technology is a wonderful support and assistant and a way to connect with the world. But it reminds us who created this, why we're created, and what for. So the analog thing, I think there's positives and a great dialogue for Christians to engage with.
I'd love to just ask a little bit about your story and how you discovered the analog lifestyle for yourself. It
Yeah.
sounds like I've been on a similar journey to you, having been buried in digital technology for many, many years. Was it the same for you?
It was. I knew that I was using technology for almost everything in life, and I am so thankful for technology. It has made things much more efficient. It's brought innovation everywhere, and I can connect with friends and family across the world. It is wonderful, but it was everywhere, and I kept finding myself grabbing my phone or looking at the next screen. And so it was actually a friend of mine that set up um, a platform whereby he was inviting a community of busy young dads who were finding that they're time starved and the technology seems to be dominating the little time they had. So it was called a Screen Time Challenge. And that's what started me on the analog thing. And not that I'm extreme in the analog, like I'm talking to you right now, digital technology. But what it did bring was some very practical wisdom of little things that add up that I could do today. For example, I was very used to looking at my phone last thing at night and first thing in the morning. So simply removing my phone from my room and charging it in another room means I'm not looking at the screen late at night or first thing in the morning, or even with books. I'm loving just buying the print now, and like I had the Kindle, and it's great, maybe even for traveling, that you can have your whole library with you. But why would I want the whole library with me? I just want one book with me. So I'm actually buying the print and traveling with the print as well, because I'm on the phone as I travel all the time. Or even James, just discovering, like, I love my phone, but there are many features on it that I have no clue about. And so through this screen time challenge, I, for example, have stopped it waking when I tap it. So that's removed. So that's one less distraction. Zero notifications except for just what cuts from my wife. And even setting time limits across, especially any social apps or news apps. There's a lot of simple things that we can do to help us manage and bring some balance to our technology, but then enable us to enjoy and open our eyes to what's around us, whether that's our loved ones, our family, or whether it's nature. And I think to bring that balance is going to be so important for our mental health. So I'm on that journey, and I've always seeking to find the balance. And I think there's a lot that we could all embrace and learn from.
Simon, I remember there was a very specific moment for me, and this is very applicable to our conversation today. There was a moment for me when I worked out that the screen was dominating too much of my life, and I was using my Kindle app on my phone, and I was reading a book about evangelism by Rico Tice, who I've got so much time for. And I was reading this book on a train to Stoke-on-Trent, and I looked up just as we were pulling into Stoke-on-Trent to see that there was a guy opposite me in floods of tears, and I had to get
Hmm.
off the train. And I thought, if I'd have noticed that earlier, what an
Hmm.
opportunity I would have had to have tried to make his day a little bit better. And that really, really challenged me. And I tell that story, Simon, because I want to talk to you about the word one-to-one, because it's built around relational, personal
Hmm.
Bible reading. So why do
Yeah.
you think face-to-face encounters remain so powerful, especially when it comes to evangelism in this age of digital communication?
Well, to take your example of on a train or on any public transport, we're moving around the world more than ever these days. And if you go onto a train or a bus, you see everyone's heads are down, aren't they? They're on their phones, looking at the little black screens, and there's all sorts of information going in their eyes, into their minds, etc., etc. And when it comes to evangelism, yes, it's wonderful that we have the technology to get the message of the gospel out in video form, audio form, podcast, etc., etc. But it's just adding more to the noise. And that's a great start. I think digital technology is a wonderful start for a world that doesn't know Christ and now can discover who he is through those means. But back to the train again, isn't there something so powerful about another human being looking at you, saying hello, and acknowledging that you exist and having a conversation with you? That interest that a human has in another human. And of course, the Christian is eager to get to a point where they can have an opportunity to point them to Jesus Christ. and they should be praying for that. But it always starts with taking an interest in that person, and just words and information on their phones is a start. But the love and care and compassion of an interested person is also part of the witness to the reality of Jesus Christ. And so I don't think you can ever replace the importance of the human connection when it comes to journeying. Ultimately, if you're not a Christian, to exploring who Christ is, but especially when you come to know Christ and you're continuing to grow in Him and discover more. That's why we have the church. What a great design from the Lord for us to gather in community, to worship the Lord Jesus, and encourage each other, sharpen each other, and challenge each other, bring that accountability. And so, uh, but going back to the people who aren't a Christian, like all of us human beings in this world are dominated by technology too. We're facing all the same things, but we all live according to a very different story. How are they going to know that story amidst all the noise? Well, there's power in that personal interest and witness and conversation of an everyday person as we encounter them, whether while we're traveling, we never see them again, or we take an interest in a local community. Like I have a fitness community. I just love the people there and take a deep interest and journey with them. If I just sent, I'm in a WhatsApp group with them. If I just sent them a message one day that points them to read something, that's just the start. But it's the continuing interest in their life because there's so much going on behind those eyes. And so, you know, as we'll probably get into in a moment, like we are created in the image and likeness of God. We're created for relationship ultimately with Him. But you see in Genesis 1, from the very beginning, that we see the first marriage. We're created for relationship with one another in marriage and family and community. And so that's hardwired into the human race. We need that. We crave that. We're longing for that. And it's remarkably revolutionary. Evangelism, like face-to-face, in-person evangelism, not because of course, you're sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, but in a world today where there's so much loneliness and mental health challenges, and people just looking for someone to take notice of them, how powerful is that? And that can only be done when you're with them in real life, in person, rubbing shoulders. And so I think the world's looking. We're looking for that. We need it.
I agree, actually. And for many years, Simon, I was on Facebook and Twitter, now X, of course. And
Yeah.
I have seen many attempts from Christians who are trying to share their faith on those platforms. And interestingly, even though I know their hearts are in the right place, it often comes across as antagonistic in a way that it doesn't when they're speaking to someone face to face. I wonder what differences you've noticed in how people respond to evangelism online versus in person.
Well, again, it's great to start with the positive on that, in that the Holy Spirit is the ultimate witness. He is the ultimate teacher. He is the one who's going to convict hearts of their sin, and He is not limited, whether it's technology is how the gospel goes out, or it's in person in a public gathering, or one-to-one. So it's just great to take that encouragement and confidence that the Spirit is within us, and He is the ultimate power for our witness. And but hearing and seeing the gospel is one thing, but what's the next step? What's the follow up? Because it is, like you say, very hard to control what happens next when you just put a message out into the internet, and people that have maybe they'll bring all sorts of inferences or their historical experiences of what they think Christianity is, and immediately maybe go on the defense or the attack, and away it goes. And so, like I admire the courage of those that do take a faithful stand to point people to Christ online and engage in the dialogue. But and it's needed. I think we need a witness there, but it doesn't stop there. And I think that's why we're all deliberately placed in position across the world by the Lord, in close proximity to other human beings who the Lord is drawing to himself. And we have a role and a privilege to be his representatives, to love them, be in conversation with them, and walk with them, journey with them as they discover more about who Christ is. So maybe it started with a tweet they saw and they've been thinking about it. But then it continues with one of the Lord's people journeying with them and inviting them to look at it for themselves. And I think that's the key thing. We can get a soundbite online, but I always love, in conversation with my friends at my fitness gym or fitness community, to eventually say, hey, the best way I can explain why I believe Jesus is who he says he is for you to look at it for yourself. Are you up for doing that? Just at one chapter, a few verses with me, take a look at who Jesus is and what he says for himself. And that is so powerful, because you know why, James? If they do that, they are directly exposed to God's living word, and that will not return void. There'll be two responses in that person's heart. They'll start to soften as they become more interested, or harden for all sorts of reasons. But again, we cannot control hearts, but we do have a responsibility to prioritize wanting to be in people's lives, especially those who aren't Christian around us, and to boldly invite them to look at it. So I think there's an online and in-person mix there. We need both. But let's not forget the importance of that day-to-day relationship and walking and journeying with people.
Well, before we jump into the next part of our conversation with Simon Lennox, let's just pause for a moment and reflect on something that sits right at the heart of this whole digital analog tension that we've been exploring. We've been talking a little bit about the rediscovery of the physical, the face-to-face, the slow and the human. But of course, most of us still spend a huge portion of our lives online. Our phones are never far from reach. Our conversations, our opinions, our frustrations, our humour, they all spill out into the digital spaces every single day. And those spaces can be wonderful. They connect us, inform us, and give us opportunities to share our faith with people we might never meet in person. But they can also be places where our very worst instincts show up. Places where we're quicker to react than reflect, quicker to type than to listen, quicker to defend a point than to love a person. And that raises a really important question for Christians today. How do we behave online in a way that actually looks like Jesus? Not just in what we say, but also in how we say it. Not just in the content that we share, but also in the posture that we bring to some of these online debates. Because the digital world has a way of flattening people into avatars, comments, and usernames. It can make us forget that behind every profile picture is someone that's made in the image of God. Someone with a story. Someone with wounds. Someone who might be watching how we speak long before they're ready to hear what we believe. So, as we continue this conversation about technology, discipleship, and the hunger for something more grounded and human, it's worth us asking this question. What does Christian witness look like in the comment section? What does kindness look like on a platform built for outrage? And what does patience look like in a space designed for instant reaction? Also, how do we resist the pull to mirror the tone of the internet rather than the tone of Christ? That's where we're going to be headed next with our guest, Simon Lennox from The Word 1-to-1. With all of this in mind, Simon, we've talked a lot here about face-to-face relationships, and I'm seeing many examples of Christians go into the online world like a bull in a china shop, not just with faith-based issues, but also with political issues. I've seen Christians who I admire incredibly getting involved in really ugly arguments in the sphere of social media. Do you think the church should be doing more to equip people to behave responsibly online, especially bearing in mind that they're Christian and that they're taking the gospel into any conversation, whether it's face to face or in the digital space?
Oh, wherever we are, whether it's a digital space or a physical space, we should, based on what the Lord is saying Himself in Scriptures, be it admonishing, encouraging each other, and as we develop the character and likeness of Christ as He conforms us to His image, that should be reflected by the Spirit's power wherever we are. And so sometimes you can think that it's harmless online to just say what you think, fire it out there, and hope that it doesn't come across negative, or you're not even thinking that. It's just full opinion, and it could bring all sorts of offense. Or it could be misunderstood. So, I think we do need to be careful. I'm not saying we shouldn't speak, but the conduct of character and the words we choose to say online, it is very hard to control what happens next, and it can really misrepresent Christ. But at the same time, there is a reaction to Christ in this world. A lot of it is negative due to maybe misunderstanding or negative experiences. And so there is something bold about pointing people to Christ, pointing to the truth, and inviting people to look at Scripture for themselves. So yes, there's a duty of care, but it's a difficult one, and like I respect and admire those who are taking a strong stance. But how you do that takes great care and tact to honor Christ in it. So
It would be really easy for us in this conversation, Simon, to be critical of social media. And I'll be honest, throughout this series, I feel like I've always had a critical undertone in my head, even when I've been having some really interesting conversations with people who've really flourished in the online world. We've had conversations with people that work at YouVersion, which is one of the most successful apps ever created, and it takes people to the Bible. I've had conversations with Christian influencers, and I always feel cynical about the role of technology, and that's my fault. And I want to just try and put in a positive question, if I may. Does anything excite you about the technological revolution when it comes to sharing the gospel?
yeah, in terms of the technological revolution, I'll take one in terms of making the Bible more accessible. Like there's a lot, even on the mainstream press at the moment, and there was even an article in The Economist talking about how AI has helped the efforts to translate the Bible in all the languages of the world. And there's a wonderful movement of many of these translation organizations coming together to try to get the Bible in every language on the planet by 2033, and that's been accelerated because of technological advances. So how can you not get excited about that? That the Bible is available more and more in people's heart language, their mother tongue. And so I'm very excited about that. Now, it's one thing to make the Bible available. It's another thing for people to actually engage with it. And so I love that there are many tools and resources in the form of apps to help people walk through Scripture, get the grips of Scripture. There's a lot to choose from. And the likes of YouVersion is a great example. It hit the billion downloads, didn't it? Not too long ago. And so that's incredible. That shows the interest and curiosity, but shows that the provision there for people to get into the Bible study is wonderful. And there's loads of apps out there. And the word one-to-one is one of those, which is especially designed, and it's free, and you can get it in the App Store at any moment. But it's especially designed for those new to the Bible, and also designed so that it's not a teacher-student vibe. So it's not the Christian as the teacher and the non-Christian or the non-believer as a student. It's a guided walk through John's Gospel, step by step, over a coffee or wherever you are, over food. And that's enabled because both of you are looking at an app, and it's the words of Scripture and some basic notes, and that's a beautiful thing. We've got to celebrate that. But I think that we've got to recognize the limits to it. First of all, Not everyone designing, not lots of the technology is doing it from a Christian worldview. So we don't have like Christian ethics built into all these technological platforms. So it's worth remembering we're in a world that's ultimately setting itself up against God, and it has a philosophy of life that tells us that reason and science and technology is all we need and it's going to solve all our problems, and we don't need God. And like the constant message that I hear from a lot of my friends who don't know Christ yet, that it's just all about progress, it's all about growth, it's all about development, and technology is accelerating that and all the rest. And so the technology is advancing, and I think it's on believers to be in the world, not of the world, and that includes the digital world. How do we be present there, to be ready to engage, to point people to Christ, but also to be ready to pick up those in-person relationships that we're designed for, we can't escape from, which are inevitable, that will result when people actually either get fed up with technology or scared of it, or through someone who's boldly pointing them or inviting them to look at Christ for themselves, if they want to look at it further. So I think there's a lot to celebrate in how the message of the gospel's getting out across the world. But I think we can do a lot with our churches to prepare and help us to be wise in both how we consume it generally, how we look after our children especially, but also to remember that the digital tech is the support, it's the starting point for evangelism, sharing Christ. We need relationship, we need community. That's part of the witness.
Well, Simon Lennox, what an enjoyable conversation this has been. I'm really grateful for your time on the programme today, and thank you for giving us your insights into face-to-face evangelism and the role of technology in our spiritual lives. Your thoughts have been a gift to us, especially in a moment where so many of us are trying to navigate some of these tensions with wisdom and with grace. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Faith in a Digital World. I hope this conversation has given you a bit of space to breathe, to reflect, and maybe even to recognise some of the subtle ways that technology is shaping your own walk with Jesus. These aren't abstract questions. They touch the very real everyday moments where our attention drifts, our habits form, and our hearts are pulled in a dozen different directions. As we've heard today, the digital world isn't going anywhere. Our phones will still buzz, our feeds will still refresh, and the pace of life will still try to sweep us along. But we don't have to be passive in that. We can choose practices that anchor us. We can cultivate rhythms that help us to stay awake to God's presence, and we can learn to live as people who are shaped more by Christ than by the latest trend, headline, or algorithm. That is exactly where we're heading next week. Because if today was about recognizing the pressures of our digital age, next week we're going to dig into what it actually looks like for us to become grounded, attentive people again. My guest will be Sarah Billups, author of Nervous Systems, which is a book that speaks right into the anxiety, fragmentation, and cultural exhaustion that so many of us are feeling. Sarah has spent years exploring why our inner lives feel so overloaded, why our churches often feel stretched thin, and how ancient Christian practices can help us to recover a sense of rootedness and hope. We'll be talking about the habits that form us, the stories we live by, and the quiet ways technology can disciple us without us even noticing. And we'll ask a really important question. What does it look like for us to follow Jesus with our whole selves, our minds, our bodies, our attention, in a world that never stops demanding more of us? It will be a conversation, I'm sure, that will be full of honesty, wisdom, and gentle challenge. And I think it's going to resonate deeply with anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed by the pace of modern life. So for now, thank you very much for listening to this program. I hope you can join us again next weekend when our guest will be Sarah Billups. But for now, we hope you have a really great week. This podcast is a production of Transworld Radio UK. For more information, go to our website at twr.org.uk.